Winter Bells, the Almost radio play. Written by Pen Stroke. Produced by Joehighlord. Chapter 3. Dinner at Pranceston.
Okay, last inspection, every pony. Twilight, fix your brother's crest. It's on crooked. Honey, straighten your tie. It's on crooked. Okay, is that it? No, wait. Nyx has a smudge on her cheek. One moment. There. Okay. Oh, wait, Cadence, fix your crown. Oh, and honey, can you make sure I'm zipped up all the way? I am? Good. Okay, quick check. I'm good, you're good, you're good, you're good, you're good, and you're good. Okay, we're all good. Let's do this on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Velvet opened the door to the carriage, stepping out onto the sidewalk in a dark purple evening dress. Nightlight was a step behind, in a full suit jacket and tie. Shiny armour followed in his military formals, including the family crest from his favourite uncle. And Cadence a step behind. She was wearing her royal regalia, much like Celestia and Luna did for most parties and events they attended. The next to exit the carriage was Twilight and Spike. She was wearing her gala gown, and he was in his tuxedo from the wedding.
Come on, Nyx, we're going to be late.
Nyx slowly stepped down from the carriage, a deep frown on her face. Rarity had made her a nice outfit for the formal evening, one she really liked, but upon returning to the house after caroling, she and Twilight discovered that Velvet had picked out another outfit for the filly, an outfit she claimed would be perfect for the dinner with the publisher. It was also a dress that might have made Rarity faint. It was a bright, holiday red dress with a bow in the middle of Nyx's back that was twice as large as the one Applebloom wore in her mane. It had white frills in the edge of the sleeves, and the bottom half poofed out into a large, wide bell shape. It was also tight, itchy, it possessed no wing holes, and more than once, Nyx was sure she was going to fall over because her back hooves were getting tripped up by the poof of the dress. Finally, her headband had been wrapped in a red ribbon to make it match the rest of the outfit. The only good part of this situation was that her friends weren't there to see her. Scootaloo would never let her live this down.
Oh, Nyx, you look darling.
Velvet then quickly moved to the front of the group and began heading down the street.
Now, come on, we don't want to be late.
And the thing they didn't want to be late to was just down the block. Lit up with lights, the sound of holiday music and general chatter, was one of Canterlot's most famous hotels. Guests who stayed in the finer suites included dignitaries, pop stars, and Princess Celestia herself when part of the castle was being renovated to conform with modern building standards. That evening, in its grand ballroom, the Pranceston was hosting the half-swarming ball for the country's largest book publisher, Equestria Publications. The company was responsible for many classics of literature, like the Mare and the Rings trilogy and its most recent windfall, the Daring Do series. They also published Twilight Velvet's mystery novel series, a series that usually managed to get onto, but not quite top, the bestsellers list. The stallions at the front of the hotel opened the doors for the family as they stepped inside the warmly decorated interior. The vibrant, red carpet stretched out before them to a huge half-swarming tree that stretched all the way to the ceiling of the foyer, which was several stories high. Ponies in fine suits and dresses dotted the room. Some lounged in chairs, reading the evening's edition of the paper. Others were checking in at the front desk, and others were still just mingling and milling around. The group, however, did not linger in the beauty and wonder of the lobby. With Velvet at their lead, they quickly found themselves at the doors of the grand ballroom. Like the lobby, the ballroom was decorated in every possible way for half-swarming. A wreath hung from every light fixture on the wall, and garland hung freely between the wreaths. The tables in the ballroom were covered in a mixture of red and green tablecloths, and a holiday centrepiece with a candle sat on each one.
Name?
The hotel host had slipped up beside the family as they came in the door. He held a clipboard and pencil suspended in his magic, waiting stoically for an answer.
Oh, Twilight Velvet and family. Party of 7.
The host flipped through the papers on the clipboard, then quickly placed a check mark on one of the pages. He then turned and pointed across the room with the pencil.
Table 12. Dinner will be served in an hour. Appetizers are on the buffet table. Feel free to mingle until you're asked to sit down.
And who else is at table 12?
Velvet craned her neck, trying to see the waiter's list. The waiter arched an eyebrow, gently levitating the clipboard away from Velvet's prying eyes. He then glanced at the list himself.
Besides your own group, Table 12 also has seating assigned for print press with the 2 guests.
And where is Edit Mark sitting?
Mr. Mark and his guests are at Table 3.
Velvet smiled, bounced a little, and then quickly turned to her family to usher them away.
Oh, this is perfect. Come on, every pony. Let's go sit down. And remember, you use your utensils from outside to in and always use your napkin.
Eyes were rolled at Velvet's rhyme, but the whole family made their way to Table 12 all the same. They were seated in the proper fashion, Nightlight and Shining Armour helping Velvet and Cadence into their fancy red cushions, while Twilight got the waiter to bring a small booster cushion for Nyx, so she would be more comfortable at the table. They took up one half of the 10-seat table, and began to wait as more guests arrived and were seated.
Velvet, might I ask who Edit Mark and Print Press are?
Edit Mark is the executive editor for my publishing company, and Print Press is the president. We've never had the chance to be at her table for the company's holiday banquet before.
So why are we? Velvet, is the only reason we're at this table because Print Press wanted a chance to eat dinner with the princess? Namely me?
No. She's just very eager to share dinner with us and find out how I'm doing on the book. You see, Edit Mark rejected my last 2 drafts on my final chapters, but I'm sure he knows what's best.
Why didn't he like the chapters?
Oh, Edit Mark just thinks I'm making the ending too predictable. I mean, it is a mystery novel, and I've already written the rest of the story, so there really is only one ending that makes sense. But he insists that I need to just come up with something better. Yes. Something better without changing anything in the rest of the story. No trouble at all.
Velvet then glanced up, her forced smile once again taking on a neutral appearance. She stood up from the table and quickly began to scuttle away.
Oh, and here comes Print Press and her family. Every pony sit up straight, I'll be right back.
Print Press was a unicorn mare of an impressive stature, dwarfing Twilight by a few inches. Her coat was a pale blue, her mane black, and she wore a matching black dress that made it look like she was going out to a fancy cocktail party instead of a half-swarming banquet. She was followed by her unicorn husband, in a tuxedo top and bow tie, and they were followed by their unicorn daughter, who was wearing a very familiar red dress.
I'm just so thankful we get to enjoy this evening with you, Mrs. Press.
Velvet then walked Print Press and her family over to the table.
The banquet looks lovely as ever. Well, the hearts-warming banquet helps promote unity in the company and good spirits. That and the HR department won't get off my back if I don't give them a lot of leeway with the budget.
After the quartet reached the table, Print Press and her husband took their seats next to where Velvet had been sitting, while their daughter was guided over to sit by Nyx, confirming what Twilight and the others had noticed from a distance. The 2 fillies were wearing dresses that were almost exactly alike. The dress Print Press's daughter was wearing had some nuanced differences from Nyx, but in overall design the 2 dresses were a dead match. Print Press's daughter, however, was wearing the dress better than Nyx. Where Nyx just looked like a red and white peppermint stick, Print Press's daughter had a natural green coat that complemented the red well.
Mrs. Press, you, of course, know my husband, Nightlight, and of course you know the lovebirds, my son, Shining Armour, and his wife, Princess Mia Cadenza.
Cadence will be fine.
Oh, look at her. Such modesty for a princess. Oh, and of course, this is my daughter, Twilight, her dragon assistant, Spike, and my granddaughter, Nyx. And look, she's wearing the same outfit as Green Ink. Tell me there's not a photographer around here, because these 2 look so cute together. A granddaughter. I hadn't realized that you and Shining Armour had been a couple that long. Correct me if I'm wrong, but to have that old of a filly? You must have had her well before you 2 were married.
Actually, Nyx is my daughter, by legal adoption. And, Mom, can I have a word with you in a moment?
Before giving Velvet the chance to answer, Twilight had magically levitated her mother away from the table. They crossed the room, going up near a wall that was away from the tables, and there, Twilight glared coldly at her mother.
So can you tell me again how you picked that dress out for Nyx?
Oh, honey, I assure you, it's just a coincidence.
Mom?
Now, Twilight, we've had discussions about these paranoid tendencies of yours.
Mom!
Velvet lifted her hoof and waved it gently, trying to signal her daughter to keep quiet.
Okay, I'll admit. I saw Print Press buying that dress for Green Ink from Hoity Toity Shop, and I picked up a mass market version of it. But, Twilight...
So you guilt-tripped me like that back at the house just to get Nyx in the same outfit as Green Ink? What about that stuff you said about how you spent hours shopping for it, and you went to 10 different stores? How it was the last one they had, and how you bought it just to make Nyx feel welcome?
Honey, please understand. Print Press is the only mayor at the company that can override Edit Mark's decisions. I've tried to get 2 drafts past him, and I'm getting nowhere on the 3rd. But if Print Press gives the green light on this one of my other drafts, then I can finally finish the book to print. This is my one night to talk to Print Press without Edit Mark sabotaging me.
So you sell out your daughter-in-law and granddaughter to do it?
Do not lecture me, Twilight Sparkle. I am still your mother. Besides, is it so much to ask for a little support from my family? You know how much trouble I've had since Edit Mark got promoted. The moment he became executive editor, he's only made it more and more difficult for me to get my work to print.
Then ask for our help! Don't guilt us into it! Nyx would have worn this dress anyways if you had just told us why!
Excuse me, madams.
What?
Both Twilight and Velvet turned in unison, glaring at the pony who had just approached them. It was one of the waiters, who was currently levitating a tray in his magic. Most ponies would have dropped the heavy load of plates and food, but this waiter didn't even flinch.
I do beg your pardon, but we are about to serve the first course. You may wish to return to your table.
The 2 mares flicked short glares at one another, then huffed and trotted past the waiter, back to their table. They sat down. Velvet brought a smile back to her face and began complimenting Print Press on her dress. Twilight also tried to put on a pleasant air, but couldn't help but wrinkle her nose in irritation whenever she glanced in her mother's direction. The first course was served expertly by the hotel's staff. It was a salad, the kind of salad Nyx remembered being served during her short rule as Equestria's queen. It was decorated with asparagus, grape tomatoes, orange segments, and a raspberry vinaigrette, and the only reason Nyx knew any of that was because she had taken to reading the little folded menu that had been tucked beneath her plate, instead of actually eating the salad. Glancing up from the menu, Nyx looked across the table. The core of the table's conversation was between Twilight Velvet and Print Press. They were talking, laughing, and most every pony else was listening in intently, making comments where appropriate. So far, the topic of books had yet to come up. All they had really talked about was how Print Press's family was doing with the holidays.
Come on, Nyx, eat your salad.
She winced a little at the gentle, verbal nudge from Twilight before looking down at the salad. She hated fancy food like this. The chef put everything on and just expected one to eat it as it was. There was no choice in the matter. The chef turned the food into some sort of art project, and not enjoying it exactly how it was constructed was an insult to the chef, and considered ill-mannered at fancy dinners. At least that's what Rarity had taught her. Why couldn't they just order what they wanted? Why did every pony have to eat the same thing? Why did the chef have to ensure every single piece of salad had some light peppering of the dressing on it? Nyx could have enjoyed the salad, if not for the dressing. Still, an empty stomach can be a powerful motivator. Tucking the menu back onto her plate in defeat, Nyx picked up her utensils, but she didn't do it magically. No, her magic was still not quite reliable enough to be able to lift and manipulate utensils. So instead, she had been provided with some dining booties. They were small fabric shoes, worn on the forehooves, that had silverware attached to them. They were fine dining tools for earth ponies and Pegasi, who had no access to a levitation spell. Getting a fork booty on her right hoof, and a knife booty on her left, Nyx eyed the salad one more time. She then pushed the fork down into the leaves, skewered them on the fork's prongs, then carried the leaves to her mouth. It was just as bad as she had anticipated. Screwing up her face, Nyx had to fight the urge to spit the leaves back onto her plate. She knew from her lessons from Rarity that wasn't appropriate behaviour for a proper mare, and this was assuredly a time when Rarity's teachings applied. Finally, Nyx had chewed the salad enough to swallow, and afterwards she quickly wrapped her lips around a straw from her glass of water and took a long drink. The straw was just like the booties, a convenience for Earth Pony and Pegasi guests, so they weren't trying to haphazardly balance fine dineware in their hooves. The small huff came from Nyx's left, from Print Press's daughter, Green Ink. She was sitting with perfect posture while levitating a fork away from her lips, having successfully delivered a bite of the salad to her mouth. Despite the seemingly innocent look from Green Ink, Nyx knew better. She had heard that same kind of annoyed, snooty humph from Diamond Tiara far too many times.
What?
Oh, it's nothing. I've just never seen a unicorn that had to use meal booties.
It's not my fault. My magic's been weak ever since.
Nyx fell silent, glancing around nervously as her mind stumbled to try and find a feasible answer.
Since I, bumped my head. Yeah, I fell out of a wagon being pulled by my friend Scootaloo. She took a corner too tight when she was giving me, Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, and Twist a ride to our clubhouse.
You're in a club?
Yeah, I'm in the Cutie Mark Crusaders. It's a club Apple Bloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle started for ponies who are trying to find their cutie marks. Twist and I have ours, but we're still in the club so we can help other members get theirs.
I see.
So, how about this dress? Is yours as itchy as mine?
No. But then again, mine isn't a knockoff.
What do you mean by that?
My dress is the original. It was designed by Hoity Toity for me as a gift to my family. My mother's company helps Mr. Toity publish and distribute his fashion catalogs all year long. Your dress, on the other hoof, is just a cheap knockoff some pony made trying to copy mine. They probably made hundreds of them out of whatever cheap red fabric they had laying around at the time. So, let me guess. You picked it out yourself?
No, Velvet picked it out for me. I actually have a dress I like better. Rarity made it for me. She's the best dress designer in Ponyville.
I've heard of Rarity. My mother's friend, who's a fashion designer, says Rarity's a hack who only found success because she's making dresses in such a rural community like Ponyville.
Hey, Rarity makes some of the best dresses in all of Equestria. She even made Cadence's wedding dress and the dresses for her and all the other bridesmaids.
I bet she got to because she was a friend of your family. It isn't because she's any good.
You take that back!
What are you two doing?
Nyx and Spike turned at the sound of Velvet's scolding voice. Every pony else at the table, and some from neighbouring tables, was staring at them. Velvet was looking particularly aghast, like she had just caught them performing some horrendous act, like stealing or kicking a puppy.
I'm terribly sorry, Print Press.
Velvet quickly got up from her seat. She was behind Nyx and Spike in almost an instant. She glared down at them for a moment, before looking back up at Print Press with apologetic eyes.
These two are normally so well-mannered. They don't usually shout like that. They must just be cranky. We've been out all day. Well, I suppose kids will be kids. Well, I think it would be in every pony's best interest if I just took these two to the children's table over in the corner.
Wait, the kids' table? Come on, Velvet. I haven't sat there since...
The stone-cold glare from Velvet quickly silenced Spike. He then put on a smile and got up from his seat.
So, what are they serving over at the kids' table this year?
They serve something different?
Nyx grabbed the menu from beneath her plate. She flipped through the couple of pages contained within and saw at the very back what was being served in the kids' selection. The kids were getting tomato soup to start, followed by an entree of a sandwich with hay fries. Then, for dessert, it was a bowl of ice cream. Ice cream where she would be able to pick the flavour. It was real food, where she actually got to pick part of her own menu.
Mom, I really don't think they need to go to the kids' table. I'm sure she won't do that again. Will you, Nyx?
Actually, can I just go over there?
Why would you want to go over there?
Because Green Ink is like Diamond Tiara's long-lost sister and I don't want to sit beside her. That and they're serving real food over there.
Okay, then go have fun. Don't get into trouble, and make sure you listen to Spike. We'll come and get you when we're done over here.
Nyx smiled, nodded, and stepped back over beside Velvet, who was understandably surprised to see Nyx was so willing to move to the kids' tables. Still, she put on a smile all the same and ushered Nyx and Spike away, quickly dropping them off before returning to her conversation with Print Press. And yes, perhaps the pair were a bit old for the kids' area, which was dominated by fillies and colts that had yet to develop the skills of sitting still for an extended period of time. But while Spike sold, Nyx just smiled and eagerly awaited the delivery of her good, simple, not fancy, tomato soup. The main course was delivered to table 12 not long after Nyx and Spike's departure to the kids' tables. It was comprised of finely sauteed carrot coins alongside a caramelised onion risotto and braised escarole. It smelled delicious, and quickly became the topic of conversation at table 12. But when they had all had their chance to comment on the food, the conversation was led away again, this time by Princess, who, after gently dabbing her lips with a napkin, looked across the table at Shining Armour and Princess Cadence.
So, Your Highness.
Please, Cadence is fine, really.
Yes, of course. I was just curious how you two were doing in the Crystal Empire. The last I heard of it was before that Nightmare Moon business a few months ago. Is it still going to be incorporated into Equestria as a new fiefdom?
Yes, it is. After what happened there, Princess Celestia and Princess Luna thought it would be best if Shining and I were appointed to be the prince and princess of the county.
I have never quite understood why Equestria has so many princesses and princes. It all seems very convoluted.
It is, to a degree, but it's also traditional. The structure is modeled after a system of lords and ladies employed by the Unicorn Royal line in the Old Country. The lords and ladies manage similar tracts of land and swear loyalty to the sovereign rulers of their kingdom. In modern Equestria, that system persists, but the lords and ladies are now called princes and princesses, while Princess Celestia and Princess Luna are technically high princesses, since they are sovereign rulers of the whole kingdom.
But why use the same name?
It's because the old royal lines weren't too keen on letting go of their power to rule, even to the two ponies who defeated Discord. Having every pony be called princes and princesses makes it sound like any pony in the old royal lines could take the sovereign throne of Equestria, should Princess Celestia and Princess Luna ever be unfit to rule. I don't think they expected the princesses to still be around several hundred years later.
Well, if nothing else, Equestria is a kingdom of traditions, and the Crystal Empire sounds absolutely beautiful from what I've heard.
It is very beautiful, though being able to see through ponies takes some getting used to.
I can imagine. And it must have been hard to leave that kingdom behind when that trouble started with Nightmare Moon. I was honestly very surprised to hear you two had come back to Canterlot.
Well, it was a desperate time. There were some in the guard that were trained to cast the barrier spell, but none were on my level. That and the pony that replaced me here at the castle had a bit of a nervous breakdown at the thought of facing Nightmare Moon.
But why did Cadence come all this way, just to leave soon after her arrival?
I had to come with Shining to try to do what I could to help. In the end, Princess Celestia felt the best way I could help was to take the elements of harmony to Ponyville. She felt it was best for Twilight and her friends to have them if they needed them. And after that, I went back to the Crystal Empire. It is our fiefdom after all, and the Crystal Ponies were very worried Nightmare Moon would come and enslave them as King Sombra had.
Those Crystal Ponies are very lucky to have two ponies like you as their princess and prince. Though, you'll have to forgive my curiosity, but I just have to know. How did they react when they heard?
Heard about what?
I'm sorry to bring it up, but Beryl and I were just talking about it on the way here. We were just wondering how well the populace reacted when they heard their prince was the one occupying Canterlot for Nightmare Moon. As I recall, the papers were calling you Tyrant Armour.
I appreciate your concern, but Cadence explained to them the same thing that was written in every paper in Equestria. All those involved with the Children of Nightmare were under the influence of mind-manipulating magic. We were not ourselves.
That's not what I heard. I actually know a few very intelligent unicorns in Celestia's school. My company publishes a number of textbooks for them. We got into a long conversation of the nature of the curse that was affecting the Children of Nightmare. It was a curse that could turn into full-blown mind control, yes, but for most, it only did one simple thing. It rewired and replaced only one simple part in a pony's mind.
And what was that?
All it did was flip Nightmare Moon and Princess Celestia's places in a pony's mind. It really was quite fascinating. All the love and respect a pony had for Princess Celestia became focused on Nightmare Moon. And, conversely, all our hatred and fear of Nightmare Moon was focused on Princess Celestia. It was no more complex than if the pair had switched seats at a dinner table. But wasn't the effect profound? I mean, Shining Armour is a perfect example of what such a little change can do. Suddenly, the kind, honorable prince of the Crystal Empire, who had guarded Canterlot so vigilantly for so long, became a conqueror. The guard turned against us. Curfews were put in place. It became dangerous to even walk the streets, no matter what time of night it was. And any infraction was met with such drastic consequences. No hangings or beheadings, no, nothing like that. But a lot of very important ponies got to learn what the interior of the Canterlot dungeon looked like. Hoity-toity was complaining about it for weeks afterwards. That's why I was curious how you were welcomed back into the Crystal Empire. After all, I can only imagine hearing about Tyrant Armour gave them such nasty deja vu of their previous ruler, King Sombra.
Shining is nothing like Sombra, and the Crystal Ponies know that. They know that wasn't the real Shining Armor. And this is the real Shining Armor. The honorable, kind, loyal, valiant stallion I married.
Now, Cadence, there's no need to get hot under the collar. Press was just curious. She didn't mean anything by it.
Yes, curiosity is fine. In fact, I'm now curious about something. Print Press. I know Bastian Yorsitz. We are old friends. And I know he's the unicorn that headed the research around the Children of the Nightmare's resurrection spell. He's also become, to a degree, the head researcher around everything involved with what happened around Nightmare Moon's reappearance. Now, I think he'd be very interested in knowing who at Celestia School told you so much about... Ow!
Oh, honey, there's no need to start an inquisition. I'm sure whoever told Print Press about what happened had a good reason, and I know she's a pony who can be trusted to keep a secret. Now, why don't we talk about something more pleasant? I didn't mean to touch on such sensitive subjects. I meant no disrespect. My husband and I were just curious, mostly because we hadn't seen anything in the papers or heard anything from our friends. We just weren't sure if no news was good news in the situation. After all, Nightmare Moon was the one that removed the blessing from every pony. Who knows? Perhaps she left a little something behind.
But there was nothing left behind. All children of Nightmare were examined physically and mentally by the finest doctors and psychologists in Equestria to ensure there were no traces of the curse left. Princess Luna oversaw the process personally.
And you're sure every pony was checked?
Yes, every pony was checked.
Twilight and most of her family stood from the table. Dessert had been eaten. The dinner part of the banquet was now over. For those who chose to remain, juice drinks would be served, and a band would play for a few more hours, giving ponies the chance to talk and mingle with those who hadn't been seated at the same table. Twilight's family didn't plan to stay for this part. It was getting late, and they would need to be able to get up bright and early for the next morning. So they began to say their goodnights. Twilight and Cadence went to fetch Nyx and Spike from the kids' tables. The others drifted away a little bit, giving Velvet the chance to speak somewhat privately with Print Press.
It really was a lovely evening, and it was a pleasure to be able to spend it with your family.
Yes, about that... Velvet, you can stop now.
What do you mean?
Velvet, when you brought the fact that your son and his wife were joining us for the banquet, I'll admit I was intrigued. I wanted to see the royal couple for myself. That's why I agreed to share a table with your family. But I also smelled something rotten. Do you know how many wannabe authors pander and flatter me, trying to get their book published? A week doesn't go by when I don't have to deal with some pony like that, metaphorically, and once literally, kissing my hooves to try to get what they want. But I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt. I thought surely one of my already successful authors wouldn't stoop to flattery and bribery just to get her book published. I thought you simply wanted to bring your whole family to the banquet. But you disappointed me, Twilight Velvet. And it wasn't just your son and his wife. I asked all those prying, borderline offensive questions on purpose. I brought up the subject of Tyrant Armour on purpose because I wanted to see if you'd actually let your family get angry at me. I wanted you to let them shout at me, to be angry, because that was the natural reaction to the comments I was making and the questions I was asking. But no, you censored them so it wouldn't ruin dinner. You told your daughter-in-law to calm down, and I know you did something to hurt your husband so he wouldn't insult me. Yes, you did everything in your power to make sure the dinner went as smoothly as possible, even when I was purposely being the worst table guest I could be. Do you really think I'm the kind of mare to be swayed by such an obvious attempt to get on my good side? For Celestia's sake, even your daughter realized what you were doing when she saw the matching dresses, and we both know how socially clueless she can be.
But Print Press, Edit Mark has been
Edit Mark isn't the one that's been rejecting the drafts for your final chapter. It's been me. Yes, Edit Mark has been reading the chapters and leaving his own comments, but he's been bringing them to me for a final review. Velvet, this new book of yours has been your finest. This could be the one that gets you to the top of the bestseller list, just like you've always wanted. But you have to finish it strong. You have to make sure the ending is just as good as the rest of the book. Otherwise, you'll get torn up by the reviewers. I know you can do it, and that's why I won't accept anything less than your absolute best for the last few chapters.
Print Press turned away from Velvet, starting to head towards the now open bar. She then paused and glanced over her shoulder.
And Velvet, you try something like this again, I'll drop your contract. You've been with us for years. You know better than this. You are better than this. And I don't need to be publishing the books from authors who resort to these kind of measures when they aren't confident enough in their own ability. Have your new draft on Edit Mark's desk a week after the first of the year. Good evening, Velvet.
Twilight Velvet stood dumbstruck, mouth hanging open as Print Press strode away, her family a few steps behind. At the same time, Shining Armour and Nightlight came up beside her. They could tell from her facial expression, even at a distance, that things had not gone well.
Honey, are you okay?
It's been her. She's been the one rejecting my drafts. I thought it was Edit Mark. On all the ones before, Edit Mark was always the one rejecting my work. Print Press doesn't read drafts anymore. She's too busy. That's why the company has editors, like Edit Mark. It's so Print Press doesn't have to read drafts.
Nightlight and Shining then began to lead Velvet towards the door.
But she saw through it. She said she doesn't need flatterers. She said she's disappointed. She expects the next draft in a week after the first of the year. I haven't even started the next draft. I don't know how to even start it. I'll never get it done in time. Then Print Press will drop my contract. I'll never publish another book again. I'll have to go back to work as a waitress, and then we'll have to move because we can't afford to stay in our house.
Velvet, honey, you're spiraling. It's not going to be that bad, I promise. Shining, please, go get everybody else into the taxi and be waiting for us. I think it would be best if we just go home and got your mother to bed.
Shining nodded and quickly galloped away as Nightlight continued to assure Velvet as they made the way slowly to the exit. Colin pressed himself up against the wall, trying to keep his profile as thin as possible. He remained still for just a moment, then glanced around the corner. Night had fallen over Canterlots. The bells in the clock towers were tolling the midnight hour. The streets were all but abandoned, and a fresh coating of snow was sprinkling down from the clouds in the sky, refreshing the blanket of white that covered most of Canterlot. And, in the distance, Colin could see his destination, the Canterlot train station. You really think this is a good idea? Colin came back from the corner of the building, flicked his toothpick to the opposite side of his mouth, and threw a glare back at Quicksnap.
Twilight Sparkle dodged us at the train station yesterday, and now, today, there's that little filly with her and Princess Cadence. Sure, the princess could have had a kid since the wedding, but not one that old. Something doesn't add up, and when something doesn't add up, there's a story just begging to be uncovered. Now come on, while the coast is clear.
At that, Colin rounded the corner, and quickly began to jog down the street towards the train station. Quicksnap followed in the air, flying slowly beside his news-cracking partner. The train station was all dark, but in the windows the pair could see the occasional flash of lights. There was a guard on duty, but they already knew that. They'd been staking out the train station for most of the afternoon, after turning in their fluff piece of a story about the half-swarming festival to their editor. It was going to be put on page 5 of the newspaper, and that was only if something interesting didn't happen at the baking competition, being covered by another pair of reporters. If that happened, they'd be put on page 8, right after the comic sections. But that didn't matter anymore. Colin knew there was a real story to be had, and he had his lead. He and Quicksnap approached the train station. They climbed up the stairs and slipped under the overhang. They then pressed themselves up against the wall on either side of the door. But how are we going to get inside?
Easy.
Colin gently juggled a small stone he picked up from the street. He moved to the double doors, quickly checking something on the handle. He then moved over beside Quicksnap, smiling slyly before he lifted a hoof and knocked on the door. That's it! That's your plan! We're just going to knock on the...
Shh!
The pair heard the hoofsteps of the guard coming closer, and the rattle of his keys. The lock on the door clicked open, and Quicksnap braced himself to be caught, but then the door opened towards them, blocking them from view as the guard stepped outside and waved his lantern around.
Who's out there?
Colum just smiled at this, and, with a flick of his magic, he threw a small rock out into the street, away from where the guard was looking, and the guard on duty quickly snapped his lantern in that direction. He stepped out from beneath the terminal's overhang, descending a few of the steps that led down to the sidewalk.
Show yourself!
Sorry, no showing. But how about a little snowing?
Colum quickly threw his magic upwards. On the overhang that protected the door, a large amount of snow had built up. With a small surge of magic, Colum unsettled the snow. It came tumbling down like a small avalanche, making the guard yelp aloud before he was quickly swept down the few steps and buried, his back legs kicking in the air. Quicksnap stared in astonishment, but only for a moment before Colum elbowed him in the side. Colum then levitated the train station keys off the guard's belt.
Come on! Get in there before he digs himself out.
Colum and Quicksnap quickly found their way to the operations offices for the train station, and, using the keys they lifted from the guard, quickly found their way to the files. Train stations in Equestria had to keep logs of passengers and tickets sold for at least a year, in case the records were needed for a court case. For the Canterlot train station, most records were stored in the basement, but were only sent down there on a weekly basis. That time of the week hadn't come yet, so, with a triumphant smile, Colum opened up the filing cabinet in the station's records office and began to flip through the records of the trains for the past few days.
Let's see. Ponyville, 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 Ponyville. Aha! Here's the records.
Colum removed the manila folder from the filing cabinet and trotted over to the nearby desk. Quicksnap followed a few steps behind, ears turned forward in interest. Colum took a seat and opened up the folder, beginning to skim through the records as his tongue toyed with his toothpick.
Okay, they were on the first train out, so that would be this packet. Let's see. Employee manifest, coal usage, travel report. Ah, here we go. The passenger manifest. And there she is. 3 tickets purchased together at the same time and paid for with a royally approved government travel account number.
So what does that mean?
Twilight Sparkle is Princess Celestia's personal student. If any pony has a royally approved government travel account that arrived on that train yesterday, it would be her.
Again, what does that mean?
Don't be dense and look. She bought 3 tickets. That's 1 for herself, 1 for that dragon assistant of hers, and then a 3rd. Who was the 3rd ticket for?
One of her friends?
She wouldn't have been dodging us otherwise. No, I'd bet my right hoof it was that white-coated filly we saw yesterday. Cadence was under a lot of public attention before and during the wedding. We would have seen this kid if it was one she and Shining had out of wedlock. That, and I did the math. Cadence and Shining had only started dating when this filly would have had to have been born, and she hasn't had any other steady cult friends. So, if that filly doesn't belong to Cadence and Shining, then she has to belong to Twilight. Yes, that has to be Nightmare Moon.
But doesn't Nightmare Moon have a black coat?
Disguise magic is hard, but Twilight Sparkle isn't a pushover. She could manage a spell to change a pony's coat colour. And who knows how powerful Nightmare Moon still is. She could have changed it herself.
I'm sorry, Colum, but this is stretching it. Even for you. How do you know?
I don't know. But it's a lead I intend to chase down, because if I'm right, this is a story of a career. Nightmare Moon snuck into Canterlot. No, that's too long. Nightmare Moon in Canterlot. Yes, that will be the headline. Now put out that lantern and let's get out of here. The guard should still be looking for his keys in the snow. We get a few feet away, I throw his keys into part of the pile, he'll find them, and in the end, he won't even suspect we were here. By Celestia, I love it when it snows.